Hello, everyone. A warm welcome. All the folks who have arrived here in person, and all the folks who've gathered together online. It's always wonderful to have this opportunity to get together as a community, support each other, practice together, see some new faces and some familiar faces. Beautiful. So this is the Sunday Sounds of Dhamma program. Can somebody just let me know how's the sound on your end? Sound is okay. Good. And that means we'll have about a half an hour or so of guided meditation, about a half an hour of Dhamma talk, and a bit of time there, maybe half an hour or so, for reflections, questions, and comments, and a dedication of merit at the end. Hola, Claudia, bienvenida. Ahora hay interpretación simultánea en español para los que desean elegir eso. Se puede elegir en el menú bajo el globito donde dice interpretación. Gracias a Claudia. Muy bien. So just a couple of announcements before we start with the meditation. So next Sunday, we're having our Sangha brunch. Folks who are local or who could become local are welcome. We are going to maybe have some eggnog or who knows what kind of special thing, but it's a potluck as always, and everyone is welcome. We will squeeze in as many folks as are willing to come. And then, so the registration is also open for two retreats that are happening in January. One, which is a virtual retreat, the second weekend in January with myself and Ayananda Bodhi co-teaching together, as we have done for many, many years, although we took a little hiatus there for a few years. And with Venerables Monlam and Monlam and Lamso. Thank you. Okay, got it. From Shravasti Abbey in Washington. And then also later in the month, I'll be leading a residential retreat on how to establish momentum in your practice, really setting up the factors for those beautiful insights to unfold. So that's up in Massachusetts, and you can check out more details on the website. All right. So let's see, for today's meditation, I think we're just going to do a very, very simple, perhaps not easy, but simple mindfulness of breathing practice. And really, the idea here is to find a way to rest your mind on one kind of phenomena and just keep coming back again and again to that. Okay? So, with that, we'll move right into the guided meditation. So you can begin by establishing your meditation posture. I like to always begin just a bit of movement. Just releasing any tension that you can let go of at this moment. And allowing the body to come into a balanced position. Sensing the supports, whether it's a cushion or a chair or some other supports, and really allowing the body to settle right here, right now. Releasing the belly. And moving the attention slowly up the torso to the chest. Perhaps relaxing the muscles around the ribs and the chest and the back. Leaving plenty of room for the breath to just breathe the body naturally. And finding that alignment all the way up through the neck and the head, that balance. Perhaps the muscles in the shoulders can also become softer and wider and relaxed. And softening the eyes. And softening the mouth. And perhaps by now the sensations of the breath have come into awareness, and you can rest the mind, rest the attention gently on the sensations of breathing. Doesn't matter where you find them, at the tip of the nose or in the nostrils, in the throat, or the chest. The diaphragm, or even the echo of the breath in the lower abdomen. Any place is fine. And perhaps all sorts of other thoughts and sensations are known, and that's fine. And just keep resting the attention back on the breath. Thoughts are not an obstruction. And then perhaps after some time of being aware of the sensations of the breath, you might check in for any pauses between the parts of the breath. No need to change them at all. Just staying present for the pauses. And having observed the pauses between the parts of the breath, perhaps you become more aware of the start of each part of the breath. Those moments where impermanence is very clear. transitioning from stillness into movement. And perhaps having found the pauses and the start of each part of the breath, you're willing to rest the attention all along the length of the breath, following along until arriving at the next pause. Staying curious about the breath of this moment. Beautiful. That brings us to the time for the Dhamma talk. Please double check to make sure that your mics are muted. Everyone online, please. So as always, I'm going to begin with the homage to the Triple Gem, and I can share screen here so you can see the chant. And yes, this is in the ancient language of Pali. It is basically something like respect to the fully awakened one, the Buddha. And Buddha also is representing, say, the human capacity for awakening and freedom from suffering. Dhamma, meaning the teachings and also the reality to which those teachings point. And Sangha, this beautiful community of practitioners who are doing all sorts of practice on this path of awakening. So folks in the room can see it on screen. I think folks online can also see it on screen. And everyone is welcome to chant along if you would like, or you can just allow the words to wash over you. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Today is December 21st, 2025. And for some folks, that means that it's the Christmas season. And I want to talk a little bit about a story that we hear a lot about at the Christmas season. And perhaps put it through the lens of, see it through the lens of Buddhism and the Dhamma. So some of you might be familiar with a story called A Christmas Carol. A Christmas Carol written by Charles Dickens. It is a story about an Englishman named Ebenezer Scrooge. Yes. And I say Scrooge is named that way because he is depicted as this character who is very, very self-centered and very greedy and harsh person in the story. And as the story goes, so this is the fictional tale as far as we know. Could be true in someone's experience, but as far as we know, Dickens wrote this as a fictional tale. And the story goes that after giving his employee, Bob Cratchit, a hard time, but finally sending him home on Christmas Eve, Scrooge himself goes home by himself to his home and is visited by four ghosts. Four ghosts. The ghost of his former partner, business partner, Bob Marley. And then, no, not Bob Marley. Oops, different cultural reference. Jacob Marley. That's funny. He should have been visited. That would have been a much better night for him had he been visited by Bob Marley. But Bob Marley came later, much later. Oh, that's funny. Okay, Jacob Marley, his business partner. And Jacob Marley comes with a very, very interesting bit of news, right? Jacob Marley has been dead for a year. And he arrives as a ghost at Ebenezer Scrooge's home on Christmas Eve and says, "The results of your life, you will carry them after you die." Oh, that sounds like a familiar concept, huh? The results of your life will be with you after you die. Hmm? Like karma, the action of karma. The things that we do with intention in our lives will generate results that go beyond this lifetime. Hmm? I don't think that that's what Dickens was implying. I don't know that Charles Dickens was ever exposed to Buddhism. I have no idea about that, but I doubt that that's what he meant by that. But it's an interesting belief, right? There are other spiritual traditions that also believe that the results of your life will, in some form, be with you after death. So Marley comes with this message, and he comes what? Weighed down by heavy chains. And he says, each link of this chain is a man or child or woman who died or who was harmed by my life. And I have to now carry these chains. And you, Marley says to Scrooge, will have the same fate if you don't stop what you're doing, if you don't change your ways. So there are three ghosts who are going to come and tell you about why you should do that. So the ghost of Christmas past comes. and reminds Scrooge about his past of losing his love, Elizabeth, because he was so caught up in his desire for money. His past as perhaps having had also some difficult experiences in his life as a child, but really allowing those to turn him to become very bitter, into a very bitter person. And some of the harmful deals that he and Marley did together. And then the ghost of Christmas present comes and shows him how even his family despises him or mocks him or doesn't understand why he is as he is. And the Cratchits are living there in this very poor conditions. His own employee, he is aware that he's not paying him enough. They live in very poor conditions. And little Tim is the smallest, the youngest of the family, the Bob Cratchit's family, and he has some form of disability, some kind of illness. Yeah. That is really weighing heavily on him for lack of care. And finally, the ghost of Christmas future comes. And the ghost of Christmas future is kind of the scary one because that doesn't speak, actually. And it just shows him some scenes. One scene in particular where Tim has died, little Timmy has died of the cold and the lack of medical treatment and care. And also that even after his death, what happens after his death? Even though he dies a wealthy man, nobody cares about him. He goes to the grave just like anyone else. Having relinquished everything except the results of his deeds. What an interesting story. What a fascinating story. There's so much we could talk about there, right? Around greed, around karma, around beliefs, precepts, right? How to make skillful choices in your life. But the thing that I want to talk about today, the particular turning point that I want to talk about today, is that at the end of the movie, what we see is that Scrooge changes his ways, right? Scrooge realizes something. He has some moment of turning around his mind. And he realizes that he needs to treat the Bob Cratchit and his family better, and he needs to be more generous, and that will help him find more joy in his own life. Right? That's the end of the story, and he goes and buys him a big Christmas goose. I don't recommend geese for Christmas, okay? Let's just be clear. But that's how the story goes, huh? We had quiche for Thanksgiving, I will tell you. But here's the point that the sort of crux of the story for me, or as I've seen it in recent years, and that is, what is the thing that turns Scrooge around? It's his realization that Timmy could die because of him, because of how he's treating Bob Cratchit and how he's paying Bob Cratchit. Right? And he doesn't want that. He asks the spirit of Christmas future, when the spirit of Christmas future shows him the future with Timmy dead, an early death in childhood. He asks him, does this have to come to pass, or can it be changed? Mm-hmm. And so he realizes from these visitations, so to speak, that he needs to be more compassionate. Compassion arises in his heart. He feels the suffering of little Timmy, and he feels his own role in that. And when he does, then he knows how to turn that feeling, because of these lovely ghosts, thank you very much. He knows how to turn that feeling toward compassion instead of toward more bitterness, right? Instead of turning his experience of suffering and responsibility into more bitterness, he turns it into compassion and care. Wow. And when he does, then his suffering is also reduced. He feels better. He feels more joy. Oh, what a beautiful message. What a beautiful message. Right? And I imagine that part of what's hard about that message is that feeling of responsibility, or that feeling of knowing that there is more suffering than you can resolve. Right? He can't prevent Timmy from dying at some point in his life. That will happen. But to say that we cannot do anything because we cannot do everything is a mistake. Right? We're called upon to respond with active compassion in our lives. And the early suttas talk about this. It's very interesting to me that in the Pali language, in the earliest language that the Buddhist teachings are taught in, captured in, or what we think may be the earliest, there are two words for compassion. One is anukampa and one is karuna. So karuna is the quality of compassion. You could say that understanding, compassion as a concept, compassion as a quality that can imbue our minds, compassion as clarity. Clarity about dukkha, which we, sort of shorthand use the word suffering for that. But it encompasses kind of more nuanced states, you could say, more like general dissatisfaction, or this kind of gnawing state of unpleasant, unresolved feelings. So compassion is knowing that there is suffering, there is dukkha, there's this kind of dissatisfaction that is part of our lives. And karuna is knowing that with clarity, knowing how it arises and knowing how it ceases. That's really what we mean by karuna. And the other word is anukampa. Anukampa. And anukampa is active compassion. Anukampa is the Buddha getting off of the seat of enlightenment and going and sharing the path with others. Or taking care of a sick monk who was dying. And he was dying in a way that was kind of gross. There was apparently like a lot of mess, bodily mess. And the other folks who lived with him didn't want to take care of him. And the Buddha came and took care of him himself, cleaned him, it said, and helped change his clothes and get him more comfortable again. And said, you should do this for each other. You should do this for each other. So anukampa is the active side of compassion, the responsiveness, right? So just thoughts and prayers isn't really quite enough. We need to actually respond as best we can. We do our part. We do our part. So thoughts and prayers are important. That's our inner world, how we experience our inner world, right? So we see in this story about Scrooge the suffering of his inner world and how he learns to have perhaps some self-compassion as well, right? To understand what are the things that are driving him to be so bitter and so greedy. And to understand that maybe that could then drive some action, some response, skillful response. At least that's what Marley is trying to tell him, right? Understand that what you do in this life will drive either your future suffering or your freedom from future suffering. You probably have seen this movie many times, some of you, and never really thought about it in this way. Mm-hmm. And to go back to that way of thinking about anukampa, the active form of compassion, it means responding, with material things or responding with actual care or sorry, folks, can you all just make sure that you have your mics muted? Thank you so much. And it also means sharing the Dhamma. So sharing the teachings about freedom from suffering is also said to be one of the most compassionate things we can do. In fact, there's a couple of different suttas, discourses by the Buddha in which he says, well, a Buddha comes into the world and wakes up, and then they share that for the benefit of many beings, for the benefit of all beings, out of compassion. That's why they get up off the seat of awakening. That's why they teach. That's why they are a role model in the society. And then he says, and then any other awakened being, any other arhat, any other awakened being also does the same. They would share what they understand about the path of freedom from suffering and how our choices lead to more suffering or lead away from suffering, lead to more greed and more hatred and more delusion, or lead away from greed and away from hatred and away from delusion. And then he goes on and he says, even a trainee, even someone who is practicing on the path, can, out of compassion, share a bit, share the Dhamma. Sometimes sharing just by being the thing, right? By being that role model, or sometimes by giving someone a book. I think a lot of people have come to the Dhamma because they picked up a book or read somebody else's book. That's one of the most interesting ways. I came to the practice that way, by reading my then boyfriend's book, Comparison of Religion book, where it said, Buddhism is different. And I thought, oh yeah, okay, different. Maybe different's what I'm looking for. It's funny. Then I ran right out to Barnes and Noble and got myself a book called Taking the Path of Zen by Aiken Roshi. A lay Dhamma teacher out in Hawaii. He's passed now many, many years ago. So, yeah, so this, we are invited. Here's what I want to say. The Dhamma is always present in our lives. We can see the Dhamma of the truth of the arising of suffering and the truth of the cessation of suffering all the time in our lives. And I think it's very helpful that we, in fact, I think that that's what it means to take refuge in the Buddha and the Dhamma and the Sangha, is that we relate to things in our lives with that in mind. You watch A Christmas Carol and think about what it's saying about compassion, the possibility of compassion, what hinders compassion. And you don't have to agree. We get all kinds of messages in modern everyday life. In fact, I often crack up about that because I have a social media account on Instagram. The Vihara also has their social media account. And, you know, you have all manner of people on there giving you advice or telling you how the world is, right? Literally, any schmo can just start expounding their philosophy of life. And people will share it. People will share it and stuff. And they can be really off base. But then sometimes you see something like this, and I think like that, like seeing the Christmas Carol movie, and going, oh yeah, there you go. Be careful what you do with intention, and do it with compassion, or see the results that come from that. Indeed, the one way to think about all the messages that you receive, whether they come from me or from another Dharma teacher or from a book or from your friends or the media, any place, is to really think about, does it lead toward greed and hatred and confusion and delusion, or does it lead away from that? For you in your life, for others in their lives. It's not always easy to discern that, but sometimes it's quite clear. Yeah. So I wonder if Scrooge was ever grateful for Marley after his moment of visitation, whether he thanked Mr. Marley for coming back and dropping him a hint. But for each of us, you might also think about that. Who are the folks that nourish your compassionate heart? Who are the folks that help you? And perhaps just to leave you with the thought again that you may think that there are some things that are going to bring you happiness or the stability you want or independence from the suffering of the world. But ultimately, there isn't anything in the world that will give you that. It's up to you, actually, to give yourself that freedom, that compassion, that care. Because it's all leaving you in death. All the other things. So take care of this heart, this compassionate heart. However small or large it may be, nourish that compassionate heart. It'll do you some good. All right, friends. So that is what I wanted to share for today. And now we have some time for questions, comments, reflections. Mm. Okay.
Need to go. Yes.
Yes, Carolyn, please go ahead.
Thank you so much for the talk and Christmas Carol, I just heard another talk on the Christmas Carol, so it's on my mind
Wow.
and already. And I find it really interesting to think about what is it that enables that transformation for Scrooge, because he's really transformed,
Mhm.
right? He's capable now of being generous and happy, and how there's an encounter with death that is frightening and it's shocking. He's frightened, he's
Mm.
shocked, and it seems like that shakes him out of his habitual, greedy,
Mm.
self-centered mind, right? And then when he realizes he's still alive, he's empowered and he has all that joy. At least I'm thinking of the movie where he
Yes.
wakes up in the morning, like he's still alive
Mhm.
and it's Christmas Day and it's not over yet. So I'm just curious about that combination of like he faces death and he is shocked by it. It it does kind of wake him up and he's empowered to live differently. Both,
Mhm. Mhm.
and if you have anything to say about that, I don't
Mm.
know. But
Well, I definitely think that uh, awareness of our mortality and of others' mortality can give us a great sense of urgency about our lives, right? It can get really knock us off of some complacency and and you know make us really think about what we want to do with the life that we have. Um, I think that's part of the reason why we have like contemplation of death in the Dhamma, right? Contemplation of the body as something that is going to ultimately fall apart, ultimately cease. And yes, and that empowerment is the interesting part, right? That now, mind you, that he is a person of great privilege, and we should acknowledge that, right? He is a person of a lot of privilege, and so the fact that he feels empowered doesn't seem like too much of a surprise to me because he is empowered in many ways, right? He is an educated white person with a lot of money, at least as the story goes, you know?
mm,
And so, but that idea that he can change his life, right? That and that he can have some uh, influence on what happens with his life and what happens with other people's lives. And take risk again, it's a matter of responsibility, right? Because up until that point, he did also have influence on other people's lives, but he wasn't taking responsibility for it, you know. And and that's the thing that I think, again, oftentimes is a stumbling block for folks. What does it mean to have responsibility for your own life and for others' lives to a degree, right? Not perfect responsibility, but to really acknowledge our degree of responsibility as best we can and be skillful about it.
yeah, and it seems like there's this joy that he
Mm,
has. Like there's this
mm,
joy of I'm still alive now. It's
mhm,
not too late.
mhm.
That brings all this energy to the generosity.
Yes, yes. And that's a great message, not to lose that message uh, is also, I think, beneficial for us, right? That we're still alive now. We have this moment to make our choices to act or not to act. And even when I was in hospice, you know, it was even more poignant like that. It's like, no, this person's not dead yet. And they know it. I'm not dead yet. I still have life, right? If they're awake, we don't know what's happening if they're not awake. Sometimes, a lot of times, those last moments are not that lucid, so we don't really know what's happening there. But yeah, that's right. This moment, this present moment of being alive, of being a being with some degree of choice and influence, that's what we have to work with. Yeah. Thanks, Carolyn. Hi, Anne. Please unmute yourself there.
Right. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay. I think what's interesting, as I recall the story, is that it seemed like he accepted and took responsibility, or didn't try to run away from the extraordinarily painful experiences of his childhood
Mm-hmm.
and the amount of hurt and pain that he caused to people.
Mm-hmm.
And as I recall, I think he went over to his brother's or sister's house after he sent the goose to the Cratchits, and said, "Yeah, I'm changed," and didn't try to sugarcoat anything. He said, "Yeah, it was horrible, but now I want to change." And so I thought that was interesting
And
too.
you
That
got frozen there for a minute. Are you back?
oh,
Okay.
sorry,
Okay, you're
yeah.
back. Sorry. So yes, after he sent the goose, then he went over to his nephew's house, and then you were saying, sorry, go
Oh,
ahead.
just that he didn't try to downplay what he'd done, or
Mm.
um, run away from the difficult experiences or anything like that. It seemed like he really owned his past, and without being brought down by it.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good point also. And the in the Dhamma, we can see remorse or regret as a positive or a hindrance. It's described as both, right? So if we look back at what we've done in our lives and we say accurately, oh, that was a harmful thing that I did or that I said or that decision that I made, or, we can learn something from that and maybe make amends or maybe make a change, right? Just as this story is telling us. And there is a way in which remorse or regret can become a form of clinging to the past, of being still identified with that person of the past. And then it becomes overwhelming and like this very heavy weight, you know? And so acknowledging that person of the past maybe made some choices that were not skillful, and then letting that be done, letting that be complete, right? And moving on to being the one who knew better now, who knows better now. This is a different person than that person who made that choice. So it's good. It's very good to study how remorse or understanding the harm that we've done in the past and letting it, moving on and letting it be done as best we can. Both things are helpful. Yeah. Did you have more you wanted to say? Or? No, you're okay there. Okay, great. Yes, Hamsa. So here is the mic for Hamsa. Yep.
Thank you. It was a lovely, lovely Dhamma talk. Thank you. A couple of things spoke out for me. I appreciated you discussing anukampa. Anukampa?
Mm-hmm.
Because so oftentimes I'm just plugged into karuna.
Mm-hmm.
And just really paying attention to that.
Mm-hmm.
Another phrase that you had said that really had me, and this is something I've been thinking about for a while anyhow, that it's not okay to not do anything when you feel like you can't do everything, or something to that effect.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly now, it's so easy, it's so easy to go into a paralytic sort of state.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And made me think of the other day, the coffee date with a friend of mine, new friend, who's a Sikh
Mm.
and very, very serious Sikh practitioner. And it said, and he's retired, he's worked for the government as a lawyer, the whole thing, and is volunteering. And he says, I'm just looking for places where I can reduce suffering.
Beautiful.
So if you have any further comments on that piece of where one needs to be careful not to go into that paralytic state and to work with anukampa.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I appreciate your Sikh friend's approach there, huh? And yeah, so the couple of things. One is there are the small things that we can do, the small choices that we can make in our lives with the people we live with our neighbors, I got to know my friend Gabby, who lives just around the corner here, because when I first moved into this place and made this the vihara back 4.5 years ago or so, 4 years ago or so, then we had early snow, like we're having this year also, but a big one. And she came and shoveled the whole sidewalk from her corner all the way up and up onto our stoop, and then over to the next door neighbor and their stoop, and so on. And actually not their stoop, just over to the next door neighbor and down the rest of the way of the sidewalk. And I went to thank her. I asked the neighbor, did he do it? He said, no, that wasn't me, that was Gabby. And I went to thank her, and Gabby said, yeah, I noticed that you're new to the neighborhood, and so I figured you probably don't have a shovel, so I came and shoveled your stoop. And I always do the sidewalk for everybody, but I thought you might need help on the stoop. And I thought, right, just that little tiny, extra 2 minutes. But that's Gabby's approach to life, That's how she operates. So there are these small things that we can do individually. And I want to say one of the things that I think we need to really be aware of, especially in a time when we can feel like the problems are really enormous, really almost unmanageable, is to really get together with people who are also trying to help, right? And to support each other with people who are trying to help. There are all kinds of organizations, all kinds of people around the world doing all kinds of wonderful work. And to the extent that we can, plug into that or help in some way, or, just even be a voice for cheering them on. Hey, go help those guys out. Those kinds of things can be very, very helpful, and can also help us feel plugged into, right, this larger field of compassion. Yeah. Derek?
Okay, I'll start with a comment. So I've been doing a lot of AI research and stuff. So just curious what a Bob Marley reggae infused Christmas Carol would look like, and what that would entail. But yeah, just
We have to do it. Get somebody. We need a filmmaker. That's
yeah.
my son-in-law. Maybe we'll ask him.
But more to the kind of question. So any thoughts on so like little things like that, like your example actually spawned a thought I had, or a memory. So is there any like kind of thoughts or comments where your compassion, or like the action might be more harder to predict as beneficial for someone? Or it might be beneficial as a whole, but still have negative consequences for some. So for example, small example, but shoveling snow. So I used to live in Baltimore, which like entire blocks of stoops and stuff that I would shovel the snow for the entire block, just for that kind of compassion thing. But then I realized afterwards that there are smaller kids in the neighborhood that actually go around and kind of try and earn money by shoveling snow. So just kind of curious, and I was like, well, I did impact them from not earning some money from like generous people in the neighborhood for shoveling snow. So simple example, but I think it kind of as an example of a larger, like what more complex reactions. So if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's a complicated world. Right? Right. So purity is very, very hard to find, right? Either a pure intention or a pure action with pure consequences, all of that is very, very hard to find. But, you know, we've talked about this before. I think you have to start with what's your intention, what's your motivation, and then you do this lovely practice that that the Buddha recommended to his son Rahula also, which is before you take an action, you reflect on how it's going to impact yourself and others. Then while you're taking your action, you're also reflecting on how it's impacting yourself and others. Like while you're speaking, for example, or while you're shoveling the snow. And then after the action, then you reflect again on how did it impact you and how did it impact others. And by that method, you kind of are, you know, you're always in a responsive mode. You're always taking in some new information, right? You can do what you can to sort of think ahead, but then you see what happens as it's happening, and then you kind of take in some new information, and then you, right, navigate according to that. So I think that if we stay responsive to the moment and you receive that information, then you have to decide for yourself, right? Then do you tell all the kids to come to you and get, you know, a quarter? Or what do you do? I mean, right? But that kind of iterative process is actually very helpful, very important, right? That we don't, because this is another thing that can happen, right? Is that we see the world through our particular karmic conditioning and karmic constellation, and then we see what we think is going to be a compassionate response, and then it doesn't quite work out that way, right? And then you have to be willing to take that information in and adjust. If you don't take that information in and adjust, then you're basically, you know, kind of imposing your view on the world all the time, right? So that's the best we can do, I think. Yeah. All right, we have time for one more question or reflection. Anybody else? Oh, let's see, there's something. Is there something in the chat there? It's an inside job, yes. Okay, no worries about your camera there, Marty. All right, folks, so Dana, I think we have arrived at time for the announcement, and Joso gonna put some information in the chat for us. Thank you both. Dana, you're still muted there, so yep.
Yeah.
Okay, now we can hear.
Wonderful. Thank you. The practice of giving and receiving has been a part of Buddhism since its inception. Giving to Dassanaya Buddhist Community supports Dhammadīpā, our guiding teacher, the physical location at the vihara, and allows us to continue to offer Buddhist teachings in support of the awakening of all beings. Our support pages are on the website under the support tab. Donate, volunteer, or offer materials. Thank you for being here today.
All right. Thank you, Dana. Thank you, Joso. And Yeah, so just one last announcement is so I'm going to be continuing the weekly schedule during this next 2 weeks. So if you want to come sit in person, if you want to sit together online, the exception being that the Thursday with Rocky, I believe, is not happening this Thursday. Okay, so Rocky's away. But other than that, the rest of the schedule, and then we'll be back again next Sunday for anybody who wants to join with that. And so yes, so may we and all beings attain like great clarity about the truths of our lives. May we and all beings know ourselves as wisdom, as compassion. And may we find our hearts nourished by the Dhamma, by the Buddha, by the Sangha. And find the generosity to share that, to be that, together with the whole world. By the power of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, and each one's efforts, may all beings be liberated. Okay, dear friends.
Muchas gracias. Gracias, Claudia.
Hasta luego, Amparo. All right.